Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In Cut the Clutter, today we'll talk about three things. One, this sort of surprise, interesting, important, also troublesome turn in India-US relations. Although you might say all is well that ends well, so far so good, but we'll come to it. Second, the new accelerated phase 3 vaccination policy that the central government announced. And three, I'll take stock of our overall fight with the COVID pandemic right now, the problems and the way forward. That will be a bit opinionated, but I promise to keep that part really short. So please don't worry. But before I get there, I will also tell you a proposition. We've been promising you new benefits as our subscribers, to those of you who subscribe on a regular basis. So one benefit that we are unfolding today is called Your Turn. You will see an announcement on the screen. I'm also sharing it with the description. What this means is it's a special section on the print where our subscribers, our regular subscribers can write their views. They can write them like extended letters to the editor. They can write them like opinion pieces, suggestions to the government, suggestions to us, suggestions to their politician, suggestion to a film star, anything you want to write. This is your democracy ball. Please write what you want. You have now such a huge, influential, wonderful audience available to you to reach your views to them. So please do write. We'll put out more announcements. Follow them, follow the links, and do write. Anyway, let me get back to work now. So, in America, some tension arose last week. And you know what happens when you are caught in a maelstrom? I know that in Indian English we prefer to say maelstrom. So if you're caught in a maelstrom, it does look like there is a lot of ugly, dirty, dangerous, killer stuff flying in the air. And it's all coming straight at you, straight at your head. And you might then start feeling that this is deliberately directed at me. So what happened last week was, as India's COVID numbers were going off the charts, and panic was setting in and people were begging for oxygen, hospital beds, remdesivir, etc., on social media, and people were helping each other. Looked like there was no center of gravity in India. I said so in a couple of tweets also. Looked like nobody was in control. Nobody knew who to reach, so people were reaching each other. At that point, it looked like while many countries on their own, friendly countries came out to help India or to offer help. Even the not very friendly countries, China and Pakistan, also offered help. At that point, the one country that was silent was America. Now the India-US relationship has been the highlight of the last 3 decades for India. That is the highlight of 3 decades after the Cold War. It has also been described by several successive American presidents as the most important relationship, America's most important relationship of the 21st century. At the same time, Britain was speaking, France was speaking, Germany was speaking, China was speaking, Pakistan was speaking. Everybody was offering help to us, but not America. So this was a bit like, remember that old line, patta patta, buta buta, hal hamara jane to jane, guli na jane, baat to sara jane. So the one who you really covet, right? He is not paying you attention. It is very heartbreaking. You feel jilted. Now, India-America relationship. Let me first of all get the basic fact out of it. The basic relationship is in place. It is not shaken. It has its own very sound underpinnings, reasons. It's not going to go away because nations act in self-interest. Nations do not act for altruism. Nations do not act in charity. Nations act in self-interest. Any nation that does not act in self-interest is bound for destruction. Anyway, so this relationship is there. But there is a pattern. And the pattern is, and it's something that I said in a tweet also, and you can see that tweet if you missed it. That pattern is that since the Cold War ended, while the India-US relationship has improved year after year after year after year, we have seen that it's been healthier and warmer under Republican presidents than under Democratic presidents. Once again, if you look at Democratic presidents, of the Democratic presidents who've served 2 terms, because those are the ones we've dealt with in these 30 years, that is Obama and Clinton, in those two terms, the second term has been better than the first term. It's like that old joke about Indian cricket team playing the second innings better and somebody saying, then why don't we play the second innings first? So you could imagine that maybe Clinton should have played his second innings first, because his first innings, if you remember, was very tough for India. That is when questions were raised about human rights, questions were raised about proliferation. India was seen as a champion proliferator. There was pressure to sign NPT, etc. There was also allegations and these stories that Narasimha Rao was trying to or planning to hold a test in Pokhran, but at the last moment, because of pressure from Clinton, he had to pull back. I have a different view on this, which I have written about in detail elsewhere, and I will share a couple of those articles also with you today. So, but second part of Clinton presidency, the second half or the second presidency was completely different. In the second presidency, by that time, Vajpayee was also here. India staged Pokhran 2. It faced sanctions. Clinton was very angry, but soon enough repair work started, because so many years after the Cold War, and remember, India had opened up its economy in 1991, and India's economic growth had really picked up. So India was a real prospect now. And even the US realized that in the post-Cold War world, they need one more Asian ally besides Japan. So they warmed up to India, and the second Clinton term was completely different. In fact, during the war in Kargil, he came and fully foursquare behind India on all issues of terrorism, cross-border terrorism. He was foursquare behind India. He played a very constructive role in bringing about peace and a truce in Kargil. He came to India. He made a couple of hours stopover in Pakistan and wagged his finger and said the lines on the map of the subcontinent can no longer be drawn in blood, which comes as close to the sanctification of the line of control as possible as you've ever seen from an American or from a Western power. Remember, under the same Clinton in the first term, Robin Riffle had raised questions about the instrument of accession. Then we saw the two terms of Junior Bush. In the two terms of Junior Bush, remember, the warming up had started under Narasimha Rao at the Indian end, and we take 1991 Narasimha Rao as the beginning of this epoch, because that is when the Cold War finally ended. Senior Bush was in power in America, and they started sort of hesitatingly an engagement, and it began to pick up slowly. But when Junior Bush came in, this really took off, and he was very unhesitating and he was very unabashed about his backing for India. He kept on saying, India is a democracy with so many people. What else do I need to know? And I will tell you, that is when Manmohan Singh, who was not a prime minister of the Indian right, he was not leading a government of the Indian right. If anything, he was leading a government of the Indian left. At that point with UPA, even the left parties, the left front, was a supporter from outside, but it was a supporter. It was keeping UPA in power. It was that government of the Indian left that signed the nuclear deal with the Republican government. And from that you can see, one, that how the world had changed, how it had changed for India and America, how the global balance of power had changed, and also how much warmer and how much more uncluttered Republicans tend to be in their relationship with India. From the word go, Democrats take their time. And similarly, when Obama came in, I will not go into detail. We know that his first term, things did not move as fast as they could have, even on the nuclear deal. But in the second term, it was a honeymoon. Remember, he came to India after Narendra Modi had taken over, and it was like they were long-lost friends. Now, that was Obama all the way waiting for the second part of his memoir to come in, where Modi will figure. But the fact is that it is not the person Obama, it is a democratic administration in America, which once again showed us that Democrats do better the second time. So the question immediately arose that, was Joe Biden also going through the same cycle? And if so, then do we have to wait for his next term, if it happens, for India-US relations to become genuinely warm yet again? So those questions came in. At the same time, there was Also, the view that he has already served under Obama for 8 years. So it's not as if he is any stranger to the situation, and he does not have to pick up the thread from where Obama had left it. He should pick up the thread from where Trump has left it, as he had done on many things. He did on Quad, he did on China policy, he has done on Russia policy. If anything, he's strengthened it. So, when all the other countries had spoken out for India, two things happened in this maelstrom. The two ugly things that came flying at us were two thoughtless and tasteless statements. One made by an American spokesman who, when asked why would they not lift the ban on supply of vaccine making ingredients to India, he said that we have to get the Americans vaccinated first, and if all Americans are vaccinated first, it is in the best interest of the rest of the world. Now that was the worst of the ugly American. That was the ugly American in his full glory, right? And it was a shock, because you don't expect friends to use this language about you when chips are down, when you are in trouble. Similarly, even more thoughtless, but maybe it hurt us less because we don't take Germany so seriously, was Angela Merkel, who chose the wrongest possible time, the wrongest, in all capitals, the wrongest possible time to make comments, gratuitous, unkind comments on India's pharma industry. Now, she is not Donald Trump, so she has no excuse that I wasn't briefed, I had no idea. She knows the role that India's generic pharma industry plays. She also knows, she reads papers, I'm sure she reads her memos, reports from her foreign ministry, etc. She's not Trump. Lack of intellect cannot be Angela Merkel's excuse. Now with all this, she makes these really unkind comments about Indian pharma, again when India is in deep trouble and is in need. That was very hurtful. So these two things came at the same time. And then it looked like Biden administration was not responding. Friday, Saturday, nothing was happening. And then it looks like the criticism in India began making a difference. So many people in India were upset. They made critical points. Even I did. I'll share a couple of tweets with you. That maybe it does look like it's following the familiar pattern of Indo-US relations post-Cold War being better under the Republicans than Democrats. And then by Saturday night, floodgates opened. The US Secretary of State tweeted first. Then National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had a phone conversation with his Indian counterpart Ajit Doval, where he said all the critical supplies for the production of Covishield vaccine are now being sourced and released. Remember, just to be clear, just for clarity, this does not pertain to supplies that are needed for the vaccine to be manufactured 2 months ahead, which is Covovax or Novavax as it's known internationally. It's an American vaccine which is to be manufactured by Serum Institute in India, the same factory that makes the Covishield vaccine. But that's a couple of months ahead. I think that will also be sorted out in the course of time. And then after that, late last night, our time, we saw a tweet from Joe Biden expressing solidarity and a tweet from Kamala Harris last expressing solidarity. So you know what? It did serve to apply the balm on Indian wounds a little bit, because this was the most important friend in the world right now, taking the longest to respond. But the fact that all these people woke up on a Sunday morning and got into such a flurry of activity shows also that an alarm was raised there, that they had also dropped the ball on this. Now, let me tell you that some repair work has been done, but it will take some more time for this moment to be forgotten. Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon had made people of India distrustful of America in 1971. It took nearly 40 years to end that distrust. Now, you don't want to play any games or have any missteps that bring it back, because anti-Americanism in India is latent, but it is all there. It will take no time coming out, particularly in our intelligentsia and in our commentariat, even in the nationalist elements of the BJP. Now onto the vaccine policy. Now this is called Accelerated Phase 3 Strategy for Vaccination in India. This note was issued by PIB a few days back, and it left a few holes here and there and a few questions here and there. Sometimes I say when I see these confusing notes, I think that these drafts are all written by the people who wrote the Income Tax Act of 1960 and all the other complex stuff that comes out from the government, which you then keep amending and improving year after year after year. And even after hundreds of amendments, these things don't become simpler. These things get more complicated. So this was a bit complex. But as you see now, as more facts come out, what's now happened is that the health minister, Dr. Harshvardhan, wrote a note yesterday. He wrote a Facebook post, which I'm sharing with you also as a link with the description, where he explained this policy and tried to remove many confusions. And he did bring about some clarity. And if you read his note, the clarity that comes to your mind is that what the initial government note was doing was to avoid stating the fact quite clearly or clearly enough that while central government will buy 50% of all the vaccines produced by Indian manufacturers at its own low price of 150 rupees, it will give those for free vaccination, but only to those above 45 years of age. So those below 45 years of age, those between 45 and 18, either fend for themselves, which means they pay for themselves at private facilities, or they are looked after by the state governments, which pays more for the same vaccines. So the key points of this new policy, as I understand from Dr. Harshvardhan's note, I'm not giving an editorial comment on this right or wrong, I'm just explaining it to you right now, that 50% of all vaccines produced by these two big manufacturers in India will be bought by the central government at the price of 150. They are free to sell the rest to the state governments and the private sector at pre-stated prices. The price they have to disclose by May 1, they have both done so, and that has caused a lot of confusion and criticism. Congress party has also said, how can a country have five prices? All these are legitimate questions, but I'm explaining the policy to you. At the same time, what becomes clear after Dr. Harshvardhan's note is that state governments are now at liberty to negotiate with the companies. So it's not as if the rate that the company has forwarded is also fixed by the central government or endorsed by the central government. So you know what? If somebody took my advice, nobody does, but if somebody took my advice, then I would suggest that states now cartelize and go together to bargain collectively with these manufacturers. And you know what? The group that goes to bargain with Serum Institute, which is in Pune, it should have Maharashtra Chief Minister heading it, and the group that goes to bargain with Dr. Krishna Ella of Bharat Biotech should have KCR, the Chief Minister of Telangana, to lead it, because after all, Bharat Biotech does all its manufacture in Telangana and Serum does all its manufacture in Maharashtra. So it's to say that it's not as if states are without leverage on this one. So that is the clarity we get now. Corporate and private sector now has been left free. They can buy at whatever price for any of the Indian manufacturers. Again, a pre-stated price by the manufacturers, not above that, but corporates and private sector can bargain with them, negotiate with them to beat down the price or get a bulk purchase price or advanced purchase price as the government has done. Also, they have the freedom to import any of the approved vaccines in India. These are the new changes and the new vaccine strategy. Because there is a lot of confusion, I thought I should explain it. And finally, India's crisis of COVID right now is the crisis of logistics. When no country has enough for a sudden spike, sudden spurt in demand, this pandemic, this sudden increase in the number of cases, no country is prepared for something like this. No country is prepared for an immediate all-front war at any given point of time. You then have to replenish and find sources of supplies. Every country, from China to America, and we know what happened with Italy, Spain, France, Britain, Germany in the middle, Portugal later, Brazil, all countries, when this stuff reaches the spike, the peak, they need help. So even when Wuhan was in deep trouble, India sent a C-17 loaded with supplies, relief materials to Wuhan as well. So there is no shame, there is no embarrassment in seeking foreign help. But at the same time, no matter how much you get from overseas and how much more you rustle up, you will still be short. When you are short, then you have to see where is what you have needed most of all. You can have 10 places offloading these big containers or whatever you call them of oxygen at Delhi airport. Now you don't know, somebody has to anticipate 3 days ahead that look, when this lands, I should send one say to Jalandhar because their 5 hospitals will be short of oxygen. I can't start sending it because it has then to be taken by road. I cannot start sending it. It cannot start making its journey when those hospitals are already short. So I have to position this ahead. Similarly, all the hospitals wherever, this is for oxygen. Similarly, for all the key medications. Similarly, for all the hospital beds, you have to see where beds might be more available, where beds are empty. Maybe one hospital in this place is overly filled, but another hospital 5 miles away has 20 beds. This is called logistics management, and nobody knows this better than the Indian Army. So this has to be an army kind of operation. In the best of my words, Government of India will pick a senior officer from the army, maybe a 3-star, a lieutenant general, make him the COVID logistics czar of India, because even the vaccination process will be a big logistics challenge. And why do I say a general? Because while any good doctor knows how to handle sudden requirements, sudden crisis with one patient, with one ward, with one hospital, it is the generals, it's the senior army people who know how to handle logistics in a very dynamic, fast-moving life and death situation across a very wide front. So I will conclude with the famous line of the storied American Second World War General Omar Bradley. He said famously, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. So India's COVID battle now is a logistics challenge.